with the members of the 1968 Black Student Union, some of them, as well as former Provost Dick Lyman. Correct? Richard, President, sorry. President.
I was provost in
Right,
68,
at the
so
time.
that's appropriate.
At the time, so thank you. What we'd like to do is going to be very informal. My name is Jan Barker Alexander, Assistant Dean of Students and Director of the Black Community Services Center, that many of you know as the Black House. And it is because of these people that we exist, all of these people on this panel that we exist. Bringing them here, Ujamaa was not here, but it's because of these people that Ujamaa House exists. What we'll do today, we'll have them to introduce themselves, let us know your hometown, what high school you attended before you got to Stanford, also what your classification was in '68, junior, grad school, whatever, president, provost, whatever at the time, and also what you are doing now, and then after that I'll go with the first question, okay? And we'll start with you, Warren.
Good afternoon. I'm Warren Heyman, Baltimore, Maryland, Frederick Douglass High School, Baltimore, Assistant Dean of the School of Education at Morgan State University. In 1968, here at Stanford, I wore several hats. I was a graduate student, and my wife and I, Jackie, sitting over on my left, your right, we were one of the first resident fellows at Soto and then Robley for 4 years. So I guess that's it.
And you worked at Ravenswood?
Oh, yes, I forgot. I was superintendent of schools, East Palo Alto, Ravenswood City School District.
Somebody wants to know what years were you there?
At Ravenswood,
Yes.
1972 to 1976.
Okay.
Although I started in 1968, I was a Martin Luther King Jr. appointment. I was not hired as a teacher in Ravenswood because they said I was too radical. But I then became principal at Belhaven School in 1968, so I consider myself a Martin Luther King Jr. appointment. And my wife was the first black social worker at Stanford University Hospital without a social work degree or license. Martin Luther King Jr. appointment.
I'm Kenny Washington, and I was a senior in 1968. I grew up in Gary, Indiana, and I attended Howe Military School in Howe, Indiana. And I was, I was a senior, philosophy major, and I stayed after school. I stayed in Palo Alto for 12 years, and San Francisco for another 10 years. So, and I moved back to Indiana actually about 11 years ago. I'm just delighted that you all are doing this, having us back here, because as I said to Jan early on, you know, we knew that we were participating in something important in the 60s, but we weren't a lot different than a lot of students at the time. I mean, you know, we're on the stage, and that's a wonderful thing, and we're deeply honored. At least I can certainly, I'm sure we all are deeply honored. But we were part of a greater student movement and a national and actually an international movement, of which Martin Luther King was certainly at the head. It was a movement that was unique in the sense that it really had foundations of nonviolence. There were some violent elements on the fringes, but they were really not the center of it. And that sense that you can get things done with nonviolence is what distresses me, that has seemed to have disappeared over the last 35, 40 years. You know, you've got people, and I'll just make this brief, I didn't ask for the speech, but I'm just annoyed by the fact we've got, you know, we're here 35 years later or so, 40 years later, whatever, and we see some things that are changed in this country and in the world, but there's lots of other issues for which we stood, that are now totally reversed. You've got a guy in the White House that's kind of stupid and doesn't understand. I'm very serious. It's just a serious problem, and doesn't really understand the subtleties of what Martin Luther King was talking about and what much of the world was talking about to get human progress, keep it moving. So anyway, I'm glad to be here. Delighted.
And Kenny, what are you doing now?
I'm a jazz musician.
He's a jazz musician, for those of you who didn't hear. So Alpha Jazz Joint, would you all plan that in the spring? Possibly talk to Mr. Washington.
I'm also a publisher and writer as well, but for 20 years I was a businessman when my kids were growing up. My kids are now 30 and 34. So when the kids got grown, then I could go back to my childhood.
Okay. Okay, Lou.
You were one of the first co-chairs of the Black Student Union.
Well, actually, Warren and
No.
Charles County and you were co-chairs.
You were, yeah.
Sounds like there might have been a file somewhere on you guys. Dolores?
My name is Dolores. Go ahead.
Ron Miller?
Ron Miller, right.
My name is Dolores Mack.
Can you speak up a little, please?
Got a cold, so that's why you hear me so low. My name is Dolores Mack. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I grew up in the Red Hook Housing Project, which is a low-income and fairly notorious project in Brooklyn. I attended Bronx High School of Science, a special school in New York, before I came here. I was a graduate student in psychology, the only black graduate student in psychology for the whole time that I was here. What I've done since then is basically I've lived in Nigeria for about 5 years, teaching at the University of Lagos. And right now, and I've done a lot of work with the Peace Corps in preparing people to go overseas, done some consulting work with them. Right now, I'm the director of the counseling center at the Claremont Colleges near Los Angeles. My concerns right now, in terms I was thinking of the African American community, are drugs and HIV/AIDS. My feeling is that they're killing our community and communities of color in general. And those are, for me, the issues that I work with, so I've been trained to do training for HIV/AIDS, et cetera, and for substance abuse.
Okay.
Well, I'm Dick Lyman, and I came to Stanford for the first time in 1958 to teach history. Stanford alumni always used to assume when I was provost and then president that I must be a Stanford graduate, because how the hell could I have the job if I wasn't? But I never attended Stanford as a student. And I sort of drifted over into administration and found myself at a very crucial point in 1968, because the president of the university, Wally Sterling, had been president for almost 19 years. He was within months of retirement. He'd had very serious illness. He was somewhat detached from things, and an awful lot of it fell on the rest of us as a consequence. I remember the trauma of Martin Luther King's assassination, partly, Kenny, because part of the immediate reaction of people like me was, oh my God, there goes the nonviolent movement. You know, we're going to have much more violence, and for a while it seemed that way, and maybe it has been more that way as a result, certainly. It was a dreadfully traumatic event, and I think it's very hard to convey what this place was like before and after that event. But let me give you one fact that says something. In 1960, which is only 42 years ago, in 1960 there were 6 black applicants to the freshman class. 3 got admitted and 2 came. In 1964, the number of black freshmen who came had risen dramatically to 10. That was 0.6% of the Stanford entering class. So there was a lot of homework to be done. There were about 90 black students all told in late 1967, I believe. Well, I won't carry on about this, and I feel like something of a ringer to be here, but it is true that I played a very central part. And I will never forget, after an afternoon of long, tough negotiations in which we'd all given some ground, and there was a crowd outside waiting to hear what was happening. A crowd largely consisting of white radicals who were just dying to get in on the action. And Kenny went out on the balcony and said, we won, there hasn't been any watering down, and it just dissipated. And I went over to a faculty meeting, which was then sitting, and I told them what we had agreed to, and then said, prepare for the backlash, because you know it's going to come.
Okay.
I'm Charles County. I'm from Washington, D.C. Born and raised there. I went to high school at Kent School in Kent, Connecticut, a prep school there. Came to Stanford in the fall of 1963. There were 15 black students in that class. It actually went down by 5 to 10 in the next year in 64. So you can obviously see the very low numbers. I think in 1962, I believe there were 7. So doubled and then all of a sudden dropped back. So there were very few black students on campus during the time I came in. I was in the class of 1967, so Jan asked, well, how was it that I came to be here in 68 and 69? The reason is that I was here for 3 years and then quit school, went to New York City as a VISTA volunteer. I was in VISTA for a year and a half in the Lower East Side of New York, where I worked as a community organizer, organizing black and Puerto Rican welfare clients. I then went to Central and East Harlem to do very much the same thing and to help in training Peace Corps volunteers. I then came back in the fall of 67 and completed another year and a half as a senior and got my degree in January 1969. But quite frankly, compared to organizing in the Lower East Side welfare clients, organizing on this campus was relatively easy. So I felt that a lot of the things that went on while I was in New York significantly influenced me as I came back to campus. In fact, you may remember in 1967 we had riots in New York City, in Central Harlem, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, and I was there during that period, so I was very much aware of the kinds of concerns about social issues throughout the country when I came back to school. And I think that one of the things that Kenny and I did was work very well together as co-chairman of the BSU and looking at a lot of the tactical as well as philosophical issues that the BSU had to deal with during that time.
Yeah, just, if I can just give a little context, because it might seem sort of disjointed, the fact, what we're saying, there were riots, there was this, there was that. The social context of America at the time is something I would imagine it would be very difficult for most of you to fathom. Because, I'll give you an example. I was state champion in speech for the state of Indiana in 1963 as a junior. My mother took me to the final, the national finals in Houston, Texas. We got down there, and I had never experienced a level of segregation and threat like this. I mean, there was subtleties in the North, of course, but we were refused, refused service in restaurants, in cabs, all sorts of things if you imagine going into a restaurant and they say, well, we're not going to serve you because you're a Negro, and you can't imagine this. I would imagine. I mean, I'm guessing that you've not experienced this, and you should not have at this point. But 1963 was before the Public Accommodations Act of 1965. And the public, 64 and 65 is when the civil rights legislation really took place in this country. And it was actually quite dangerous for black people to function in most of the United States. In urban areas, certainly, things are pretty cool. And it's not as though we lived every day under the threat of oppression. It wasn't like that, because you had healthy black neighborhoods functioning like you actually don't have now so much. And so you had places that nurtured you and gave you incredible strength. That's what Martin Luther King came from. That's what Thurgood Marshall came from. That's what, just any number of leaders and strong black people that can't be hurt. You hurt them physically, but you can't hurt them mentally. And that's the difference now, but, we can go into that some other time. But the point is that the context for what Charles is saying, there were riots in '67. These were about, racial and issues of impoverishment. The United States was a profoundly different place. It really was. There has been progress in the issues of race. There were very few Asians. You didn't see any Asians in most places. It was just as bad for Asians and Latinos as for black people. That's the way the country functioned. And so women, even, the women's rights movement has had tremendous difference. Women, who didn't have any of the kind of positions in executives and administrative kinds of advantages that you have now. These things were not here. And so, yes.
Okay, with placing that context, some of the students have had a chance to read Justice and Hope, which is the BSU history from 1967 to 1969. And obviously why we have assembled you during Martin Luther King celebration is because his assassination seems to have been the catalyst for the actions that happened in terms of taking the mic. They received an email saying, come and have lunch with the people who took the mic and the person they took it from. So,
My wife has always objected to the fact that news stories always say they seized the microphone.
Right.
She says, you gave it, you handed it to them. Well, 90 of them and one of me.
I don't think that's quite, I think that was a catalyst to seizing the mic.
to that event.
But black students were organized, began to
Right.
organize before then.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I was just thinking that part of the reason I'm here is that along with Charlotte Washington, Kenny's wife, we had co-edited this Black on Black, this publication that talked about many of the issues that we're raising now, about black disenfranchisement, which is what we were really experiencing. We felt alienated. How many of you sometimes feel alienated on campus? We felt alienated, that people expected us to fail.
Can you all answer that question for her?
How many of you feel alienated?
How many of you feel alienated
Occasionally
from
feel
time to
alienated
time here at
on
Stanford?
campus? Well, just imagine when the numbers were much lower and the expectations were even lower for how you would succeed or how you might fail in campus. And for me, I came from a predominantly black and Latino Puerto Rican neighborhood. And it was like culture shock to come to either Bronx Science and then to come here to Stanford. It was a real culture shock. And I was actually afraid because all of the accents I heard here sounded Southern to me. So I'm like, wow, if I'm going to a place where all of the, I come out to California and the accents to me from New York, they sound like these people are from the South. And I was like, oh my God. So it was a really shock. No one to really talk to. You now have somebody like Jan, nobody to talk to about whatever issues or concerns that you have. It was really difficult.
Now, reading in Justice and Hope, there is a piece about right after King was assassinated, roughly 40 or so black students burned a flag.
Yeah.
Were you all there?
Yeah, we were part of that.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if we could say that. Can they
All right.
still prosecute us? That's what I was wondering. I was serious. I was wondering, Yeah, has it run out? Has it run out? Yeah, we were part of that. We were just very, very angry. Look, Malcolm X, I would be more a proponent of Malcolm X, to be honest.
Right.
That's where I would be more like coming from in some ways. And Malcolm X was assassinated. King was assassinated. It looks like every time you raise up a black leader, what happens? He's assassinated.
A few of ours got assassinated too.
And then, exactly. And then some people that may give you a little support, they're assassinated too. So we were just, I think, furious, angry.
Now, from an
Disappointed.
administration standpoint, when they burned the flag.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that?
I'm afraid I don't.
Okay.
I honestly don't. I mean,
We did.
We should do it again then. You didn't get the message the first time.
Don't bother to try to impress me. I don't have any power.
A point I would like to make, I think bringing us back really should be a catalyst to you. I think it was Charles Dickens that said it's the best of times and the worst of times. When we look at what is Stanford now, we don't see too much change in what it was in 1968. So we should be a catalyst to you to say that we've got to do something about this. We've got to create an atmosphere at this university that respects our diversity, that respects our uniqueness, but more important, respects our intelligence. You see, Stanford will say 90% of the students who are admitted to Stanford graduate. Harvard says the same thing. I was there. They say that because they know the people that they are bringing in, and they know what their capabilities are. But if you don't do anything about that or with that, then you are really disappointing us. For us to go around today and see that things have really not changed. They really haven't. And you have to take the leadership, and you have to dare to be different and dare to make the difference, because I tell young people all the time like you, TGIF, you're talented, you're gifted, you're intelligent, but more importantly, you are fortunate. You are fortunate in that you have the opportunity to be whatever you want to be, although there still is racism. But if you don't make it happen, I said to the Charles Ogletrees and the others who were enrolled when we were there, that while you are here, take advantage of the alliances that you can make with the people who are going to be in the White House. Because if you exclude them now, when they get into positions of power, they're going to exclude you. Don't relinquish your integrity. Don't relinquish your ethnicity. But take advantage of what God has given you to make a difference in the community. And the community out there needs you badly. But you have to also feel that you are needed. And I say to them, because I think what I was in 1968 was like a mentor. I just told the story. Somebody asked my daughter a couple of weeks ago, who's 37, wasn't your father the president of the BSU at Harvard? She said, I hope not, as old as he was when he was at Harvard. But I say to you that it's critical that you take what you have and make a difference, because you have it. And you've got to build coalitions. You've got to take advantage of the resources at Stanford. It's ludicrous for me, remembering what we went through in 1966, 67, and 68 to go to the Black House. It has not changed since 1968.
And it's a
That's
disgrace.
ludicrous.
It's a disgrace.
It is. When I look at the alumni
It's a
house,
disgrace.
I'm flabbergasted. I'm upset that you are not upset. And maybe you are. Maybe I'm putting you down. I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to excite you and say to you that you have an obligation to the Creator who endowed you with what it is you have between your ears. And I urge you to stand on the shoulders of those of us who stood and sat where you are now. When I first got the invitation to come, I was recuperating from major surgery. At the same time, Dennis Green was being fired. A few weeks later, Ty Willingham took the job at Notre Dame. Their agent, Ray Anderson. They all stand on the shoulders of Bill Moultrie, who was the first black assistant football coach, and Tom Massey was a part of that negotiation. I argued for a counselor because I knew a coach at that time wasn't going to do nothing but deliver the food or whatever, or the towels. But Art Harris, who was an outstanding athlete, and Gene Washington, they argued for we need an assistant coach. So Willingham, Dennis Green, and Ray Anderson need to recognize that they stand on the shoulders of this group, because we made it possible for this university to say, okay, it's time for us to do something we haven't done before. And you need to continue to remind them of that. Ray Anderson is a millionaire. What is he giving back? And I'm going to ask him that question when I see him, because I remember he was a student sitting right where you are. And my
He's a
wife can
sports
tell you
agent,
about
by
the
the way.
tales. that we had to endure of students like yourself, and I don't envy the resident fellows here now who have to answer the phone calls when your parents call and can't find you. I see some smiles, so I am preaching to the choir. But let me stop and let other people say something.
Now, I have one, probably one last question before we open it up to the students, either to share with you what they think of Stanford in 2002. I know that I've shared a lot of things about Stanford today, but the one question I do have is for you, Dolores. You are but one woman sitting up here. I hear from the background, my peanut gallery back here. Tell me what it was like to be a woman involved in this.
Well, the credo back then was, actually, one interesting fact for you all to know, I went to high school with Stokely Carmichael.
Okay.
And you remember his credo about black women? Y'all remember what it was? What was it?
Want me to tell you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Asked what is the position of women in the black movement, and he said, prone.
So the position that we took, or that the students took, was they felt that black men needed to be put forward, blah, 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 and black women should stand behind. We didn't take the position we need to be prone. Let's get that part straight. But we did say, okay, we will support black men in leadership positions. So we did a lot of the work, a lot of the organizing, etc. And that's not to take anything away from black men, but that was part of the position at that time.
It's sometimes been said that Stokely was joking, or thought he was. I don't think that makes it much better.
No, I don't think he was joking. I think that's an issue that I hear even today with people saying black men have been injured, blah, 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 blah. And I say, give me a break. I mean, let's get real here. If black men have been injured, then what does that mean for black women? We've all been injured. We've all been hurt. And I just don't buy it that we should stand behind. We have to stand together.
Yeah, you can't.
And don't let anybody tell you as a black woman that you need to stand behind.
I think it's safe
do
to
it.
say, too, that the black women at Stanford in 1968 were really the catalysts. They were the ones that moved the brothers, and they did most of the work. They did the writing, they did the organizing,
Sound a little familiar?
and they pushed. I mean, they pushed the brothers to, step up to the plate. And people like Dolores, like Joyce King, like Sylvia Evans, and the list goes on, were very active in getting things done and challenging. I can remember when we came out on the balcony, raising our fists, and you've seen that picture. The first comment we got was from Sylvia Evans. She said, "What happened to Rosenzweig?" And she tells me now, "Warren, you looked at me," she called me, "Dad, you looked at me as if to say, be quiet." Because we didn't get that demand. That's one of the demands we were adamant about that we didn't get.
Could you
That
tell
we
them
want-
what that demand was?
That we wanted him out of his position because we felt he was very insensitive to the black community. But the women were very important.
We thought it was pretty much racist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just insensitive.
We did push hard.
Yeah, but the important thing that this whole thing of trading oppressions between men and women is absurd.
Yeah.
And any that's a product of the culture, though. Black people didn't invent sexism in this culture. They bought into it.
Exactly.
And the fact is, in many African ethnicities, females have a prominent role of power, and that's I mean, if you want to go back into our our ethnic heritage, that's their matriarchy is not unknown at all, and it's respected. And it's also been a part of our what's made us survive in this country. I'm referring to the Sojourner Truth and scores of other black women throughout the 19th and early 20th century who helped us survive. So this whole nonsense, this so-called conflict between men and women, none of you should ever buy into that nonsense. That's not even discussable, non-negotiable, that women have a prominent, equal, or superior role if it's appropriate, in various situations.
Okay, with that said, I'd like to give the students context of what their morning has been like for some of them. They have visited all of the ethnic centers. As you can tell, they've been to the Black House, as they said, it has not changed. And I did not pay them to say that.
I'm sorry, I have to say, it's a disgrace. You mentioned it, and that was just like on my mind. I think it is a disgrace.
They're talking about the size, please.
The size of the house.
It was clean when they did
I don't mean, and it should be elegant, it should be beautiful, it should have marble, like that alumni center have, it should have that beautiful wood up there.
It was clean, but it was claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, it was very small.
It's too
it was
small.
tight.
It's not usable for big events and so forth. I'm at Claremont, and it's smaller than this place, and they have a better Black House than what you've got here, and they don't have anything like the endowment, et cetera, that you've got here.
The new Alumni Center is kind of a provocation, though. I think it is overdone.
Yeah. Well, I don't
Too big and
mind.
too grand.
Well, we can be overdone for a change.
Maybe.
That would be a welcome change
Fair
instead of
enough.
being underdone and underspent and underfunded.
Okay, with that said, I'm going to move into a quick comment from Morris Graves, former director.
I want to say something in respect to your comments about the BCSC or the Black House. I came here in '95 to the University of Houston as director of BCSC, and the vice provost for student affairs was an African American woman named Mary Evans. And one of the first things she offered me as director of BCSC was to relocate the BCSC to the old unit. And she was prepared to remodel the entire third floor. But some of the alums who came after you guys, okay, and the upper class undergrads had bought into the concept and the idea that the BCSC had to stay where it was because of the history and tradition. And Mary did not want an uprising among the undergrads if we relocated.
Okay.
And so we had to settle, we had to stay there. As much as I tried to develop, some community input, we had meetings over here in Uchima, the students would not buy into relocating.
Now, if you all remember in context, that also was a hard period
Yeah.
for Black students during that time. They had been without a director for 2 years. So
They
you know,
needed the continuity
They
at that
needed the
time.
continuity
That
at that
time
time.
is past.
Exactly, thank you.
What is that? They
That's 7
say,
years
get over it.
Okay, so at this point, Tom Massey has a quick comment, and then we want to hear from students.
Well, I just want to make a comment on where we were then and why it feels so claustrophobic. And it hasn't really changed. The inside has been rehabilitated, but not changed that much. And it did become the Western Black House, like the Western White House. It was a place where BSU, VC, BCSC, it really became the heart and soul of the Black community. And so it was difficult to change it, even had that set of issues not occurred where we needed leadership. The Black House is a symbol of who we are, is one of the 3 or 4 institutions we have. Black House, Ujamaa, African American Studies. So it really is hard to change. But a group of alums have gotten together and said it is time to change. It certainly is time to improve what we have and get more space to do the kinds of things that you are doing now on campus and off campus, to really kind of appreciate the Martin Luther King papers, the BCSC programs and things that they're doing. And so we've really gotten together and tried to formulate how we could approach the university and partner with the university to provide a larger space, which we would help pay for if they would give us space, maybe even raise the Black House and put a
And
grander
connect to Harmony House,
yeah,
that whole
grander
plot.
structure. So
Yes, I mean, there have
That's
been,
not
I did
Okay.
tell you that there have been
Yeah.
discussions with alums, and they want to roll some things out to students, but without university support.
Well, I think the university should support it.
So, and
I
so
mean,
we
I've
have
been to the other centers.
Now, I'd like to open up.
We
to-
started it. I'd like to see something better than that.
I'd like to open up to students. Any questions, comments, what life is like here at Stanford today? Or questions from any staff or faculty that are here?
The sister in the back.
Right back here. Can you stand up, Nadia?
Yeah, I have a quick question about the nature of the struggle.
Can you stand up? I
From
can't
what
quite
I've
hear you.
gathered, sorry.
From what I've gathered, you were fighting at a time when there was no Black House. The BSU was still very young. The AAAS African American Studies program didn't exist. And I think today the students who are active, and I would say it's a substantial amount of us who do care a lot and invest a lot into the community, there's not quite a mic to take back. You know, now we're told, well, you have Ujima. We're told, well, this freshman class is actually majority non-white. You need to be satisfied with that. You know, we have a AAAS program, you know, much more elaborate than most other universities. So when we try to grip a mic, there's no mic, and we're gripping and we're fighting. And I know I've been involved with the administration in many different negotiations, and they do a dance. They do a dance, and because there's no set, we want this. I think we've reached to the point where we need a lot of collaboration from the administration to get the things done that we need to get done. And when they're dancing around, it's hard to get them in a position where you can pin them down to say, well, what can you give us? What do you need from us? How can we work together? What kind of advice do you have about the change in the nature of the struggle? And how as students we can adapt to that change and be effective in the new environment that we're dealing with?
Well, my orientation towards that is, number one, there's no progress without struggle. That's a given. And that occurred when we were here in 1968, and that occurs in the larger community. And that is still the case today. So the fact that it takes a significant effort to get things done, whatever you determine to do, is going to be a struggle. One doesn't release power willingly. One has to take power. And that is a philosophy, too, which we expressed in '68, and is still the case today. From that perspective, the orientations, the tactics that have to be used are very much the same. And that is that surrounding the issues that are developed and determined upon through the communication that you have among the groups that are here today, and people who are here today, and all over 30, I'm saying, Black-oriented groups that are here on campus today, have to get together and focus on those particular goals that you feel are appropriate. And after determining those, focus on those and struggle to, with the administration, with the process, with the faculty, because the faculty is an intimate part of the decision-making process at a university such as Stanford. You have to work with the administration and with the faculty and with other associated groups throughout the university community to develop a process that will end up in your success. That's not one that can be accomplished in a single semester or a trimester or a quarter system that we have, whatever it is at this point. And maybe not in a year, perhaps it'll be 2 years or 3 years. But that has to be determined upon and sustained. And I think you'd find also that most alumni would support you in that. In fact, if there's sufficient communication between alumni and the student body, and we can establish that and help to ensure that that occurs. So I think that those kinds of tactics you have to determine upon. Tactics are very, very important. And you have to ensure that you have those appropriate tactics in order to reach the goals that you've established.
President
No, I would-
Lyman, just one second. From your perspective, from the administration, how would you answer that question?
Well, I don't feel really well equipped to answer because I'm so long out of the administration. You know, I don't know what your life is like dealing with the administration, except in general terms. It's obvious the administration is huger. You're more numerous. The place is more complicated. It's, as the young woman said, it's a complicated dance that has to go on now. It's a confrontation over, pardon the expression, black and white situation is in some ways relatively easy. You know, the issues are pretty darn clear when there's no real affirmative action, when the complexion, the literal complexion of the people at Stanford was almost entirely white. I can't believe how changed that is. I mean, when you walk around the campus, it is a different place demographically from what it was. I just want to say one thing about America generally, and that is that we're not going to get anywhere until politics stops being a dirty word. I think so many Americans are turned off politics and they don't understand that you can't run a country without politics. Politics is the business of power. It's power sharing, power seeking, power protecting. It's all about power. And if you let it be done by other people because you say those politicians are too crooked or too dishonest or too flawed, The money's too big, let's get the money smaller, let's do something about that.
Okay,
I would
Dolores?
respond, well,
I just wanted to make a brief comment on what you said. I would say be consistent, persistent, and patient. You have to decide on whatever your goal is and just keep going for the goal. And as he pointed out, he said 1 year or 2 years. This has been 30 years since we've been back here. And we can say, even though I lambasted the Black House, I can say I've seen change. I've seen some change, okay? But it takes a long time. This is called a social process. You're taking courses, you know about that. It's not going to happen in a year. It's not going to happen in 2 years, 3, 4. You start it, you keep pushing, and something will happen. But you have got to be persistent.
Warren?
yeah, I think a basic premise would be all living things must grow or they die. And so if you keep that as your basic premise, then you're moving forward all the while. The process that I would recommend is sort of what we called in the 60s the PDC process. First, you have to develop a programmatic thrust. What is it that you want to do with what it is that you have or you're trying to get? Once you develop the programs, then along with the programs, you develop your demands. But along with the demands, you also have to have some consequences. That if this doesn't happen, here are the consequences that you can expect. A simple process for getting through the PDC process is to be able to answer 3 question words. The first question, and you must answer them in this order. What is the first question word that you must answer? And you must try to come to some collective, as the young lady said, collaborative arrangement about the answer to that question word, what? Once you've answered that question word, the second question word is why. Because if you are not sure as to why you're moving in a certain direction, then you're going to have trouble getting there. There's an African proverb that says that if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Then the third question word is how. The mistake we make is we tend to move from what to how, or even to the how. Case in point, in 1954, the Supreme Court passed the Brown versus Board of Education. Took them a year to decide how they were going to do it. And the how response was, with all deliberate speed. This is 2002. Schools are more segregated now than they were in 1954, all deliberate speed. Their mistake was they focused on race, and that was not the problem. What was the problem? Racism. Because if race was a problem, why was it that all white schools were not as inferior to all black schools? Because there certainly were all white schools. So I say to you, answer the question word what, then why, then move to how. The programs, demands, and consequences, all living things must grow or they die.
I do have a myth. I have been fortunate that I have been able to spend time with them. And they read an article in the San Jose Mercury, and it referred to there being 100 black students here, or 90 black students here at the time. And Dolores was like, 90? 100? Seemed like it went over 25 of us here. So what I want them to say is, not all of the black students were involved in that struggle. And I know that you, the leaders, deal with the apathy. Why won't people come out? Why won't they come to the BSU meeting? But that didn't deter you. How did you keep on going?
You have to be determined in yourself that this is something you want to do, and accept that no movement do you get all of the people involved to the same extent. If you look at white people, they're not all on the same page. Okay, they have different pages. And don't expect all black people to be the same. There are differences. You go, if there's one issue that you can get 90% of them on, that's great. If you can get one issue, you can get 30% of them on, you go with what you've got and you do the best that you can with it. But do not expect to get all, even most black people to be politically active. That's almost inhuman. We don't find that in the way people function. But if you can get enough people together to plan and execute things, and then you may find a way to reach other people at different levels. Some people are more into the cultural, some people are more into the political, some want more, what can we do economically? You find something for different people and different interests, but do not expect them to all be the same. We are all different kinds of people, and that needs to be accepted.
I think from where we were at the time, where there were so many fewer black people on campus, I would say that, number one, there were a number of people who didn't want to be involved. There were a number of people who we did not want to be involved. No, let's just, call it like it was. Because when you had fewer people, you pretty much knew the other folk and where they were coming from. And there's no monolithic group of people. All black people weren't thinking the same way, weren't motivated by the same things, weren't going to get the same result if they did participate. And so we made a determination that the folks that we could get who were going to be along and go along with the program that we were putting out, that were going to share our goals, was fine. Those brothers and sisters who didn't share, number of them were really very much focused on other kinds of things, particularly in the graduate school. We're too busy, or law school, perhaps medical school, other schools, fine. But those that participated, so long as we were together, as long as we shared a common interest and the way in which to get those interests dealt with, we would use that commonality to be effective in what we're doing. And so you're not going to bring everybody with you, but the benefits of what you do derive to everybody, okay, will fall to everybody.
What you need is what's called critical mass of people, and you don't need a majority. But I'd like to address your issue, because I'm not sure that it was the answers that you heard were specific enough. You have to know who's on your side in power on the campus, both in the faculty and in the administration. Isn't it the case now that you have a black kid who's president of the student body or running? Is that right?
He's ASSU president
Okay.
and a Filipino vice president.
I don't know if your student leaders are sympathetic to the issues that you're addressing. Well, you see, and all you need is to know who's on your side, and certainly within the power structure, the student, faculty, and administrative power structure, there've got to be people who agree with what you're after. And all you do is you talk with those people, let them know exactly what your program is and what the benefits are to the school, and certainly there are going to be benefits to the school. Yes?
I'll just say quickly, sometimes with the administrators who are on your side, you get the impression that they're pinned down in a situation where even though they might agree with you ideologically, they can't practically give you what even they would like to give you.
Well, administrators are like politicians in the sense that, Dr. Lyman's comment notwithstanding. I mean, politicians are not bad people per se, but the point is they in a new corporate environment of university administration, they cover their ass. And, very few of them have guts, frankly, from what I've seen, and that's an unfortunate situation, and I don't mean to generalize, but the point is, they need to know that their students, that you have this critical mass of students and faculty members who want this. I don't know how strong the faculty is anymore. I know there used to be a fairly strong faculty senate here, but lots of universities, the faculty has been disempowered over the last 30 years. So again, there's been this rise of administration in American universities to the new kind of administrators. Not Dr. Lyman was a scholar. And I don't say that just because he's here. He was a scholar, and most administrators had that scholarly background, but you don't find that so much anymore. You find corporate people.
Okay, I
And
think
that's
there was
what
a
you
question
do.
over here.
Back
Here? Okay.
First, I wanted to thank all of you all for everything that you have done. Standing your shoulders down, you really do benefit from the giving of the mic, the taking of the mic. And that, I guess in part, I want to say that most of us in this room, the students at least, have grown up in the late 80s and the 90s, and we don't realize how much our parents, our aunts and uncles, our grandparents, you folks went through to make sure that we could dream and do whatever it is that we want to do. So with that, there was mention that things haven't really changed that much from the time you were here in the 60s to today, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that. And the second thing I'm curious to know about is, really, we have a lot of different organizations representing a lot of different goals. As you know now, we really don't have sort of a prominent black leader for the Black nation at large, or even at this university. And I'm wondering, how would you recommend that let's just say on this university alone, that the different organizations who are all trying to manage different goals and different objectives work together to really bring back a greater sense of wholeness and sort of that sort of critical mass movement and vision, so that we can start to put some sort of real pressure on administration and other folks from whom we need to tap to.
What are you after, though, when you say put
Well,
pressure?
see, I think that's another part of that, as Nadia pointed out, it's very nebulous right now. It's like, we have it really good, we need something more, but what is it? Is it a better Black House? Is it a PhD program in African-American Studies? You know, I think a lot of us kind of came up and it's been kind of good, it's been kind of cushy. And we don't know, you know, we don't have the vision that you all did in the 60s and 70s, 50s before. And right now, I think we're all just sort of saying, well, I'm going to get mine because I have a platform now to stand on. But I'm not sure how to do that in such a way that the community as a whole benefits, so that I can try to give back.
Can I quickly give a little context? There is a Student of Color Coalition that includes METRA, the BSU, Asian American Student Association, and the Native American Student Association. That tenure for people of color is at the top of their issue. And they are doing the research. So there are some things that they know, grabbing mic and talking, they are doing something. So I don't want you to think that no one's doing anything. So I did want to give a little context.
Well, I guess to give another context to that is that I'm not saying that no one's doing anything, but the sentiment is that it doesn't really feel like we're doing something. You know, we have organizations, we have structures, but I mean, if you ask me if we're doing something, I mean, tenure is one issue. That's one issue probably of tens or hundreds that I think we can continue pushing. But as a student, I've been here for 4 years. I don't feel like I've truly fought for something, and I'll leave having fought and hopefully progressed on some sort of issue.
I think that one of the things that well, first of all, what we did and how we did it would not work today. If you notice, you can't come through Stanford's campus. That happened after 1968. They put those barriers there after the protests. So you have to think differently. And I think it's also important from my perspective to say that my criticism was not to the students. It was really to the university that has not responded to what I see personally as the needs of students in 2002. And certainly it would be unfair to even try to criticize, because I don't know what you are doing or you are planning to do. But I think what you need to do is to communicate with other campuses and student organizations on other campuses to find out what is happening at these institutions that are not happening at Stanford. I think you want to create a climate that lends itself to research and history of African and African American life. I think you want to develop a program and plan, but not something that's in isolation. And it's very difficult, as excuse me, Kenny said, to try to get everybody together. But remember, there's always an informal group that runs every organization. And it's your task to find out who is a part of that informal group. And once you get your critical mass, that critical mass must be ambassadors for your cause. So when you go to fraternities, sororities, social, athletic, etc., you are informing those who are in those circles about what it is you're trying to do and get them to see that it's all for the same purpose.
One of the things that I do as director of the Counseling Center is we review each year. We go on a retreat and we look at, this is what we wanted to do. And then we look at how far have we come in terms of what it is we wanted to do. And it's looking at, so I don't know, like you've been here 4 years, I don't know what you started out with. It has to be very concrete in some ways. What did we really want to accomplish? And then how far did we get along that goal? And most of the time we tend to put ourselves down in many ways. You may have accomplished some things that I don't even know about, but you don't feel like it because you haven't even owned up to it. You haven't even said, look what we did or look what happened. And I don't know what positive things may have happened for you. But if you don't review it that way, you don't even know about it. Or if you haven't set the goal, then you don't know how far you've come along in terms of reaching the goal. It's just a very simple thing. Review your progress towards your goals. Set the goals and then review it. How far have we come? Do we need to change it? What do we need to do differently in order to reach that goal, and so forth? That's very helpful. You've been here for 4 years. What have you done in 4 years that you can feel good about? And it may not be this big sort of thing out there. Did I go and tutor anybody? Did I help somebody in a class? Did I volunteer in some other kind of way that was helpful to people? We all look for these big, big things. And sometimes social change is about small things that can happen in a community or to one individual.
I think our last question, Aja, and then Tom, you'll close with a comment.
So my question has to do with continuity. And as far as I've heard a lot of you speak of not knowing a lot of the changes that have happened so far and coming back 30 years later and then seeing that things haven't changed that much since when you were here. And then I also heard a little bit about, there's an alumni push for expanding the Black House and that sort of thing. But I think there's a lot of division at this moment between, say, the Black alumni or the alumni in general and the students that are trying to do things on campus. And that there isn't much, in my experience from working with the BSU and other organizations, there hasn't been a great deal of alumni, whether it's financial or moral backing as far as getting different motions forward. And that, if we don't know where we've been, we can't continue to move forward. If we don't know what they were pushing for in the 70s or 80s, we can't exactly know what methods or what we need to push for in the 90s. And I just wanted to know what kind of suggestions you guys had as far as trying to keep that continuity going and trying to keep that alumni input coming to the student groups so that they know what happened before and how the alumni can possibly help, whether it's financially or on the...
I just want to respectfully kind of disagree with Warren about, in his comment about there's been no change. As a person who's not been here, Warren maybe knows and speaks for himself in that regard, but I don't, as a person who really hasn't been here for many decades, I'm not in a position to say something like that for me. There might be a lot of things different that I just don't know about. And I can't imagine that they wouldn't be somehow different. The world is different. And there has definitely been enormous progress for black people. And there's no question about that. Is there still racism? Yes. But in my own, speaking for Kenny Washington, period, I would say my mind is open as to what has happened on this campus, because I would like to know from you, because your experience is the one today, not mine. My experience here ended in 1968, and I can't imagine that things have not changed since that point. As far as what we can suggest in terms of the issues that, like the other gentleman mentioned, and how do you? It seems to me that are things too cushy, as he suggested, and how do you rally people? If the issues for your generation are so clear, it seems to me, but maybe not fully appreciated. The environment is a critical issue. This country has very deftly over the last 90 days, 100 days, since quote the 11th, swept that aside. So that's kind of a shell game going on here. Bush didn't want that on the table in the first place. But that is the issue that will affect your life as an adult, your children's lives, and your grandchildren's lives long after we are gone. That is an issue for you to be very concerned about. As black people, the destruction of Africa is a profound issue. And it is an issue that has been ongoing for 500 years. And you see this implosion and this disintegration, and it's heart-wrenching, because if you know where these people and us have come from, you have got to be moved. And that is something that your generation can still take up regarding what is left. And this is an issue that, international relations, this country you're in, you are members of an imperialistic, you're citizens of the #1 imperial country that has ever existed. Yet this is enough public relations that comes out of this country that makes you think, well, what we do is good, and we bomb for your good.